The latest victims of fighting in eastern Ukraine have been laid to rest in the capital. They were killed during a surge in violence around the government-held city of Avdiivka. It's on the front line between Ukrainian soldiers and pro-Russian separatists. Shelling has damaged the city's water and power supplies. And with temperatures below freezing, the government is considering evacuating residents. In Donetsk, in rebel-held territory, a power cut led to more than 200 miners being trapped underground. Both sides are suffering casualties and blaming each other. Russia, which denies backing the separatists, says Kiev is responsible, and Western nations know it.
В Украине заводят ситуацию в тупик, и последние провокации киевского режима, которые на этих днях произошли, лишнее тому подтверждение. Даже глубоко предвзятая германская пресса.
The outbreak of violence is shaking an already fragile ceasefire, but European leaders say it's still the best prospect for peace.
We call on Russia to use its considerable influence over the separatists to bring the violence to an end.
Ist es so wichtig, dass wir alles tun, auf der Grundlage, die wir haben, und das ist das Minsker Abkommen, voranzukommen, auch wenn das sich als sehr schwierig erweist.
As part of the Minsk II agreement signed by Russia, the Ukraine, Germany and France, there is supposed to be a full bilateral ceasefire and a withdrawal of all heavy weapons by both sides. But there have been more than 5,600 ceasefire violations in the last week, and the OSCE reported 2,300 missile explosions from artillery, mortars and rocket fire on Sunday alone. That was the day after US President Donald Trump spoke on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kiev and the Kremlin are both waiting to see if President Trump will lift sanctions against Russia for its annexation of Crimea. And what role, if any, this latest violence in eastern Ukraine will have on that decision. Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Moscow is Sergei Markov. He's a member of the Civic Chamber of the Russian Federation. And from New York, Andrei Dobryansky. He's an American-Ukrainian cultural and political affairs specialist and a representative of the United Nations for the Ukrainian World Congress. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Sergei Markov, let me start with you. The UN Security Council says this is a dangerous deterioration going on in eastern Ukraine right now. The ceasefire is basically dead. Who do you blame, sir?
You know, I'm not blaming. It's absolutely clear that Kyiv very interesting to restart again the war for the few reasons. First of all, after change of administration and Donald Trump coming, Washington, so as Berlin, make pressure on Kyiv to follow Minsk II, because Minsk II fully disrupted by Kyiv repressive regime. And because Poroshenko don't want to fulfill political part of the Minsk II, he wants to show, look, it's impossible to do it because it's, even military ceasefire doesn't work. And second goal of Mr. Poroshenko is to have a military hysteria in the country, because he faces now possibility of the new parliamentary elections.
Okay, so let's take those two things. Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
He's very much not popular.
Let's take those two things, pose it to Andrei. Andrei, so Poroshenko's fault, it's Ukraine that's itching for a war.
Well, Imran, thank you for having me on. You began with the United Nations, and it's not just the United Nations that's putting out statements, it's governments all over the world, and they're basing this on facts, not like the esteemed gentleman on the other side of this issue. You can just look at the OSCE report that was released yesterday. They themselves say that they cannot even count the number of violations that Russia has enacted on Ukraine. And to mention the ceasefire, it's very important for people to understand the terms of this ceasefire. It's not about stopping every single bullet. The terms of the ceasefire, first and foremost, were to remove rocketry and heavy artillery from the field of battle, so civilians and infrastructure would not be damaged. That is what is being violated right now and why you're seeing deaths. So when you're talking about artillery over 100 millimeters being used, when you're talking about volleys of Grad rockets being used, you're talking about the type of escalation that the entire world does not want to see, which is why the United Nations has ruled time and again, condemning this at the General Assembly level. The European Parliament has condemned these actions. The Venice Commission has condemned the actions of Russia. This is simply another term of Russia violating the international order.
Okay, so Sergei Markov, when looking at the OSCE reports, Russia is blamed for the bulk of those more than 5,600 ceasefire violations. So Andrei has a point, doesn't he?
No. First of all, Mr. Dobryansky belonged to those part of the United States politicians which get responsibility for using terror against Ukrainians. It's exactly you are who destroy Ukrainian democracy and put a group of terrorists into power in Kiev. And sometime it will be a new Nuremberg process of this Kiev junta. And these people will tell us what they have been done. And everybody knows that Poroshenko now very much interesting because new U.S. administration came and they repeated a few times, Minsk II should be fulfilled. For doing Minsk II, first of all, Kiev should stop fighting over the neighboring with civilians in Donetsk, Makiivka, and another big cities. Who is sharing neighboring in the Donetsk and Makiivka, which is, by the way, megapolis with million of the people. Okay. And who is interesting to start this war again in the situation when Washington saying to the side, go ahead with Minsk II. Go ahead with Minsk II. Okay. Stop your propaganda.
Let me ask. Okay, so let me ask Andrei. Andrei, you know, Sergei mentions the new administration. He's mentioned the new administration a few times here. It seems as if Russia's pretty happy with the new administration. Yes. Do you fear that President Trump's throwing you guys under the bus right now?
Well, just to clarify the issue, if my esteemed colleague on the other side would like to say that the administration is sending people over, nobody from the president's administration has gone over to Ukraine. There has not even been a Secretary of State who has been in office for more than 24 hours at this point in terms of our transition of power in America. So there are no people from America guiding the terms of what's happening in Ukraine. We know that in Ukraine we have towns on the Ukrainian side of the ceasefire demarcation which are now in danger of a humanitarian crisis because of the lowering of temperature. So it just needs to be restated that when we're talking about the crisis situation, we're talking about areas that are being shelled from Russian positions onto Ukrainian territory, and those Ukrainian civilians are being threatened. Now, as far as what's happening in the United States, again, we've had a Secretary of State that's only been sworn in yesterday. He was only confirmed yesterday. We do not have any undersecretaries that are in charge of the Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia desks. We don't have anybody who's in charge of the soft power diplomacy like USAID or Peace Corps, etc. So a lot of positions still need to be filled for anybody to make a reasonable judgment of how this administration is going to move going forward.
Sergei Markov, a year ago, this week, I think, I spoke with Petro Poroshenko. He spoke a lot about wanting to join NATO, wanting to join the European Union. He clearly wants to strengthen ties with both NATO and the EU. If that happens, Sergei, is that a declaration of war against Russia?
No, Russia would accept any decision of Ukrainian people. If Ukrainian people decide to join European Union, go ahead. We'll be glad. European Union, a good coalition of countries, rich countries. Even in NATO, which is aggressive to us, but we would accept if it was a decision of Ukrainian people. But we never accept this decision of illegal, undemocratic junta of terrorists who grab power right now. Mr. Dobryansky support terrorists who kill thousands of political opponents in Ukraine. This generally now something about 60,000 Ukrainians killed, and Mr. Dobryansky support this terror.
Okay, so I have to give the man a chance. Okay, Sergei, sorry to interrupt you. I have to give a man a chance to respond to that. So, Andrei, do you support terrorists? We're running out of time.
The only internationally recognized terrorist forces in Ukraine are the ones that are being backed by Russia. This has been supported by countries across the world. Again, you just have to look at the United Nations resolutions. You have to look at what the Venice Commission has said. You need to see what the OSCE has said. This is not a question. The only terrorists acting in Ukraine are acting on behalf of Russia, as when they killed 298 innocent men, women, and children shooting down an airliner over Ukraine. That is terrorism.
Okay, Sergei Markov and Andrei Dobryansky, I hate that I have to end this, but I do. Thanks so much for joining us.